Welcome to Business Unmuted, the Northern Business podcast sponsored by Virtue Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers. Check out its website at virtuemotors.com. Now, I'm Graham Robb, I'm the owner of Recognition PR, and we've got 70 plus clients. We represent them around the media and in PR generally, and they actually have 30,000 staff and a turnover of £6 billion. So dealing with that group of people certainly gives us an insight into what's happening in the economy. Well, today's episode of Business Unmuted is a three-guest discussion. In the studio, we've got Ben Quaintrell. He's the founder and managing director at My Property Box in Darlington, which offers an end-to-end property service for landlords, and also Ben's a small property investor as well. He's got some very interesting developments in the town of Darlington and beyond. Down the line, we have the author and financial journalist Iona Bain. Now, she's talking about millennial money, because she's an expert on the money habits of millennials, and there's some really different attitudes that group of our population have towards money to maybe older people who've, like myself, been in business a while. Let's talk to Iona about that a little later. But we start with Nathan Spencer. Nathan is a director at UK REIF. That's the UK's real estate investment and infrastructure forum. It's a very important event in the property sector, and it's happening in Leeds in the next few days, actually next week. Let's find out more about it and what it's all about. Nathan, thank you for joining us on Business Unmuted. REIF has been a part of the landscape of the property and investment scene for a long time now. How does it do it? What does it bring together?
Yeah, so as an organisation, we've been around maybe 10 years or so, but UK REIF, which is our largest event, this is going to be the second year that we've run it effectively. We bring together the public and private sector. I don't think in the past there's been as much need as there has been right now to make sure that public and private sector really drive forward regeneration, development, and that's all we do really. We bring together the investors, the developers, the local authorities, and with them in the room, everybody else wants to come from the built environment to have their say on the future of our community. So we think it's those key markets coming together, and therefore the rest of the built environment and the property industry, the infrastructure industry, they all want to come and be involved in that conversation.
So before we go on, full disclosure, I've got a number of commercial clients that are at that event. People like the Naylors Gavin Black, the commercial agents, DPP, GMI Construction, a construction company. But also I'm on the board of one of the mayoral development corporations in the northeast of England, and I know they'll have a presence there as well. And it seems to me that every day I'm getting emails in my inbox from your team telling me that the city of Manchester is going to be represented, Sheffield's going to be represented. It seems to be that lots of areas of the country are taking an opportunity to display their investment opportunities for real estate investors.
Yeah, that's right. And there's so many as well at the moment. There's so many opportunities out there. And what we've tried to do is try to make it as inclusive as possible. So we have London coming, which is very rare to get London out of London. Mm-hmm. But we've more or less got all 32 London boroughs in attendance. We've got Cornwall, Belfast, every city in Scotland. One of the key things that we have done, apart from bringing the domestic market together, we work very closely with UK government, both the Department for Business and Trade and the Department for Levelling Up, and we have an international delegation coming over. So it's not just around bringing the domestic market together, but also bringing those investors transformational investment we hope from overseas, and we try to facilitate it in the right way. So we offer London, Manchester, Birmingham the same type of facilitation that we would do to a Carlisle, to a Hull, to a Bournemouth. We try to make sure that at the event we're putting them in the room with the right people that can bring around new homes, new development, new investment. So yeah, we're trying to do it in the right way, and we think we've hit the kind of the nail on the head with what we're doing, and we're seeing quite a few deals off the back of the first kind of inaugural event that we did last year, which has then seen attendance double for the year coming.
Now, it strikes me, Nathan, that there are a number of key ingredients to successful development. One is the availability of sites. Next is the creativity of developers to make the sites the appropriate use for both the consumer, the end user, and the local community. Next is the availability of finance to fund the developments. Now, have you got people there who are interested in finance as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the three big pension funds are there in big presence. So Legal and General, Phoenix Group, Aviva. With Brexit regulations, they freed up quite a bit of capital to invest into regeneration projects, around about 100 billion in total. So we have all the time we keep getting told that the capital is there. It's the opportunities that we need to bring forward, whether that be kind of making sure that we go through the planning process, making sure we have the community on board, making sure that the design is in place. So we have the people there who are wanting to deploy capital. I think there's about 1,000 people who are representing investors, and they're investors into property, they're investors into energy, to heat networks or heat to energy networks. There's a type of investor for everybody at the event. So yeah, the capital is there, and that's what we're hoping to kind of match make towards those opportunities. Local authority, developer-wise, development corporations. We're all about connecting the dots.
Now, this kind of event is familiar on the international landscape because there's an event called MIPIM, which happens in Cannes. I'm sure you know MIPIM. You've probably been to MIPIM. I went to MIPIM once, and I went twice actually. Very interesting. Are you trying to emulate that international conference?
I wouldn't say emulate, because certain events overseas have certain connotations which come with them. We want to make sure that this isn't seen as the MIPIM of the UK, and we're doing a lot to try to mitigate that. But at the same time, there's obviously been a lot of people that compare it because we're putting investors in front of opportunities to hopefully drive economic growth. So yeah, we're not trying to emulate, but it's quite difficult to kind of get away from the fact that we are doing what some other events do. But what we're trying to make sure we do is actually make those connections, whereas a lot of events, you put people in a room and hope they find each other, where actually we've got a lot of private events and a lot of facilitation that happens behind the scene. So if people are looking for investors into social housing, we will put them in front of investors into social housing. So we're trying a lot to make sure that we're ticking the boxes on those lines. And then we have been in the US last week, actually, because we've had interest in running UK REEF overseas as well.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
We're looking to branch out too.
I think that would be a fantastic idea. I was in the US myself just 3 weeks ago, and the economy there is forging ahead, and it was great to go to Philadelphia, which is where I was, where they had a development corporation similar to the one we have in Teesside, which is maybe 5 years ahead of ours and is building out now. So it was interesting to see that while I was in Philadelphia. Now, going back to your conference, of course, or your event rather, it comes on the back of the levelling up agenda, I suppose, starting in earnest in 2019, 2020, and having turbocharged some parts of the north. Teesside has done very well out of the levelling up agenda. Other parts maybe a little bit further behind. But has the levelling up agenda given any kind of impetus to the things that you're seeing happening at the conference?
I think it certainly gave some sort of positivity, particularly last year. There was this big kind of backing behind it. It was one of our key themes, that the main stage was very much a levelling up stage. I think what we found with levelling up is it's actually made some of the local authorities look at what opportunities they have. There's a lot of critique around areas like the process around submitting areas for investment zones, but actually at the same time as being some negativity, it's also meant that that's brought forward opportunities that maybe the local authority hadn't packaged up before, hadn't looked at before. So I think depending on where you ask, it will have a different feeling. We get that quite frequently, particularly if they've not been able to acquire any money from the levelling up funds. But actually, I think it has given some positivity to make not just the local authorities, but actually the general public is now looking at levelling up, thinking, oh, right, great, regeneration, development. It's not something that's always on the political agenda. And actually, I think from a voter's perspective, it's made people look a lot more into what's happening locally than what we were doing prior to the levelling up kind of funding and everything else that comes with it.
We'll get a call to action to the conference in a minute, how people can go, but let's just bring in Ben Coyne-Twell. Ben, you run My Property Box in Darlington, and you've got branches around the northeast as well, but you also are an investor yourself. Tell us the kind of things you've been investing in the town of Darlington and elsewhere.
Yeah, so born sort of out of accident really is in the northeast, and particularly in Darlington, is professional HMO house shares, which have always been around across the country, but certainly in Darlington it was generally sort of the there didn't really exist professional house shares. Because demand is so high in the town, there's huge demand for it now. So yeah, we've just done, me and my business partner on one project have just completed a commercial to resi conversion on 2 10-bed HMOs right next to the Treasury building, very high spec. They've actually just gone on the market last week, and yeah, we've got a lot of applications coming in, which just shows the demand at the moment for accommodation.
Just give us the sort of the elevator pitch for what someone would get. What kind of person are you aiming at? I think Iona would be interested in this, and what kind of fee will they be paying?
Yeah, so basically a lot of professional people working in Darlington. It could be two aspects. It could be short-term or long-term lets. Or you've got short-term serviced accommodation. Might be somebody travelling up from London or to the area, 2 nights, 3, 5 nights a week. They want a permanent site, so it's not like a hotel room. It's like maybe they still want their own access, or they might want more of a permanent place, 3 to 6 months on an AST, assured short-hold 6-month tenancy. But again, not a hotel, so we'll have a shared kitchen, shared communal areas. They can, network with other people in the building. We've got working pet pods in the basement, should they want to just plug in and work from home. So yeah, it gives people different options that work in the town.
And what kind of price will they pay for that?
Well, HMOs in Darlington, the prices have really gone up significantly in the last 2 years. So 2 years ago, HMOs in the town were around about £400 per calendar month. Some of the nicer ones now are achieving £600 per calendar month. But for that, all bills are included. So you walk in, it's like a hotel room, you drop your bag, electric, gas, water, broadband, everything's included. So it's easy in, easy out sort of accommodation.
And you've got you said 10, your first development
20, 10.
10.
Yeah.
And you reckon they'll all go, will they?
Oh, we've just put them on last week. I mean, yeah, we've got housing associations interested, all sorts of interest, the Treasury interested. But yeah, we put them on Rightmove last week, and I think we've got between like 5 and 10 applications already.
How interesting.
Yeah.
But this formula has not been used in provincial towns in the northeast of England much at all, has it?
Obviously, not really. Obviously, you've got your students clusters in Newcastle, Sunderland and Middlesbrough, but generally professional HMOs in the northeast, aren't common. Obviously, they've been born last few years just from demand for property.
I'm going to bring Iona in now. Iona writes about millennial finance. You've got this great, there's a logo of your book there, Own It. It's a great book, by the way, endorsed by my good friend Liam Halligan from the Sunday Telegraph. Iona, what Ben is saying, this product that he's offering, that'll be familiar to you in central London, won't it?
Yes, HMOs are very common in London, and you may have been reading about the rental crisis that is reaching new highs now here in the capital. It's a real struggle for young professionals who are on a really good salary even to just find a place to rent, let alone be able to afford it. And I think that's forcing more and more young people to think about where else in the country they could move to. And I actually think that one silver lining of lockdown was that remote working became more normalised and accepted, and that does give younger people more scope to move to other parts of the country and do work that doesn't require them to be in the capital all the time. So I think these kind of developments could be the future, because they could point to possibilities where younger people could be moving around much more. They could be having much more flexible housing situations rather than being rooted in very rigid HMO tenancies in the capital, often for no good reason.
Well, Iona, 3 cheers to that. And of course, in the northeast of England, where we're broadcasting from, one of the great things, and north generally, is we don't want to see our young people go to a brain drain to London. We like London very much, but I prefer to visit as a tourist rather than to lose our young brains to it. And the difference in price, Ben's talking about £500 or £600 a month, and he's thinking that's fantastic. But if you were looking at that kind of price from your perspective, you'd be thinking it's cheap, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. When you're looking at the prices now for renting an HMO, not even in a central London location, often on the fringes in, zones 5 and 6, that are not particularly convenient if you are working in any way in the centre. Yeah, that sounds to me very reasonable. And it's interesting you talk about the brain drain. I'm finding in my line of work, more and more of the media industry is moving north. I travel to Manchester every week to do BBC Morning Live, and also I film Rip Off Britain from Manchester too. So it's actually definitely changing. It used to be the case that if you wanted to work in an industry like the media, you had to come to London. It's one reason why I've based myself here. I've stayed here because I've made lots of connections and I've put roots down here. But certainly now you're not having to face that unenviable choice between foregoing that, exciting career or going to London and having to pay through the nose to rent there.
Well, we can't move on without talking about your book. But this book we can see it behind Own It. Tell us what the premise of the book is, what you've been looking at, and what you've discovered as a result.
Well, I wrote Own It because a few years back I saw that young people were feeling really fed up with their finances. They were feeling quite hopeless about the future. And this was even before COVID came along. So ever since the 2008 financial crash, my generation has felt that the housing market, the pension system, savings, the ability to get a job that's well paid and allows for progress, and the student loan changes that have occurred in recent times, all these factors have really militated against young people feeling like they have a stake in our economy, feeling like they are making progress in the way that their parents once did with relative ease. And I feel that's caused a lot of young people to look for riskier ways to make money. And that's one reason why we've seen this boom in Bitcoin. It's one reason why young people are going online and investing in Forex and all sorts of very exotic and often dangerous schemes that can turn out to be completely fraudulent in the worst case scenario. And it struck me that there was just very little in-depth but helpful, friendly and funny advice for young people about what they could do with their finances in the long term. Because yes, you get lots of people, offering their views online about what you should do with your money. But actually investing is complicated. It's rewarding, it's fascinating, and it's very important. But it's not something that you can cover in a little tweet or an Instagram post. It's something that you, I think, need to read about in order to get a handle on it. So that's why I wanted to write the book and to do it from the young person's perspective.
I had the privilege, and I regard it as a privilege, I've just mentioned going to Philadelphia earlier last month because my daughter got married and she's a millennial, she's 31. Coming up 31. And so I had to stay with her for a few days. And it was very interesting for a sort of 59-year-old to stay with a young couple in their early 30s and witness the difference in how they live their life. Now, she's lucky because she has bought a home. So I know that's a fixed difference between many young people in this country and my daughter in America. But the other things were very similar. An attitude to rental, an attitude to disposable things, an attitude to paying for things that otherwise could be... So buying expensive coffees, eating out, having things delivered, whether it be food or things that or parcels from Amazon rather than going into shops, streaming services. I must have counted 10 streaming services that the couple subscribed to. Being a member of a gym and having a Peloton subscription. And it's just like these things mount up, and sometimes inventory isn't kept in the same way that maybe my generation would of outgoings because it's easier. Cash, no use of cash at all. No money in a pocket ever.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. Yeah. It does. Now, I'm not making a value judgment on that. It sounds like I'm being a dad talking out of school here, but I'm not making a value judgment on that. But in what you've just heard, do you think that is something that familiar, and is that something that maybe young people themselves have to look at, or society needs to adjust the way it values young people?
I don't think your daughter's situation is unusual at all. I think here in the UK, lots of millennials, if not most millennials, are living in a similar way. Depending on how much they're earning, they may not have quite as many expenses, but they are living a version of that lifestyle where they are taking advantage of technology in order to have everything at their fingertips because that's what they've been encouraged to do. But I often refer to a lot of these services and superficially attractive consumerist options that millennials avail themselves of today as being a bit of a consolation prize for the really big assets that they are overall missing out on.
Yeah.
So I think that most young people would happily, trade in some of those things for the opportunity to own their own home, to have, outgoings that are more affordable, and to know that they can one day retire and that they're not going to have to pay an unrealistic amount into their pension every month in order to have just a decent standard of living in retirement. And that's increasingly a concern that I'm seeing among younger people, because they're constantly being told they're not saving enough for retirement, and yet we're not doing enough to acknowledge actually young people are getting a really rough deal when it comes to their pensions. They're being told they need to save more and more, and yet we know how strained people's incomes are, especially during the cost of living crisis. So I think
right.
that experience you spoke about is definitely not unusual.
We'll bring Nathan and Ben in, but before I do, let me just say, my daughter relocated from London because of some of the reasons you've just discussed, by the way, and I think that's, and I completely agree. I think that she would definitely trade a turmeric latte, for a house. Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Iona make some amazing points and I'm looking forward to reading a book. But yeah, I think the problem is there's no financial education in the education system. So young people grow up knowing how, there's nothing wrong with like the history and geography of the world, but they don't know how to run their own bank account, they don't know anything about pensions, they don't know how to leverage, they don't know about debt, and there's no education for that. And like Iona said, it's about reading, listening to podcasts, going to networking events, surrounding yourself with the right people and learning about that and learning, from other people around you. And yeah, it's so important, but obviously, young people don't always have that.
And Iona, I know your book gives some tips and hints, but the truth is that still some of the stuff is out with the affordability index is ridiculous. Now, I've just got the note here. Average house price is £287,800. That's the standardised average house price in the UK, March this year. An increase of 1% in just 1 month. It's absolutely huge. So what are the top tips? I know you've got a whole book, so you can't concentrate, but what are the top things that you're saying to young people who look to you for your advice and guidance?
Well, to give a very quick overview, I think firstly you've got to get the basics right. And it was really interesting hearing that perspective there on financial education. I think you have to educate yourself and fill in those gaps. And thankfully, you can do that now. It's just a question of finding reliable, accurate sources of information. But getting the basics right is really important. So making sure that you're in the budgeting habit, that you're saving if possible, that you have the necessary insurance as well. But then beyond that, maximizing your pension. So that doesn't mean contributing huge amounts. It just means, putting a little bit extra in, for instance, when you get a pay rise, putting that extra money towards your pension. Your future self will thank you for it. Also, not overthinking investing, just doing it and deciding that something is better than nothing. So even if you can only afford to invest, £50 a month, actually, that might be the best way to invest, because if you're regularly putting in a small sum into the stock market on a frequent basis, that might actually be better than putting a massive lump sum in all in one go at some point in the future. So get started now and then get to know the different investment options that are available and figure out what's right for you. So if you want to be a more passive, hands-off investor and you're pretty time pressed, you're probably going to look at robo-advisors compared to someone who actually really wants to take more of an interest, particularly if they want to be maybe a more ethical green investor. They might look to go on an investment platform and build their own investment funds and do it that way. And then also just getting clued up about the scams that are out there, all the pros and cons of Bitcoin and just how risky it is. I'm not anti-Bitcoin, but I think you need to be extremely careful with it. And then sticking with investing rather than expecting to see results here and now. I think we're in a very instant gratification culture, but investing is not about that. It's all about the long term, and it's about sticking with it and letting the magic of the stock market really build up that fund for you in the future when you need it.
Or property.
Or property, yes. Of course, there's a difference in geography of whether you could invest in property here in the northeast, you could, but not necessarily in London. Iona, I tell you what, I know who's getting a copy of your book for Christmas. And it'll be flying across the United States to the United
music
States.
to my ears.
Thank you, Iona. Appreciate you talking to me. Just hold on there while I wrap up with Nathan. Nathan, a lot of what Ben and Iona have been talking about is property, and it all comes to property in the end, doesn't it, when it comes to housing? Because that's the great shortage in the country.
It does, yeah. But for those houses to be there, you need the skilled workers around there. New jobs. We all talk. That's probably the big thing that people talk about is always generating new jobs. But to have new jobs, you need the skilled workers around there. You need to make sure that the skilled workers. We mentioned brain drain earlier, that they are staying within those regions. I think we're doing a much better job of it, particularly up north than we have previously. But yeah, housing is much needed. And what we try to do is it's not all around the large scale, because when we talk about affordable housing, actually, when you look at some areas around these sort of percentage of homes that need to be delivered, what's affordable in sort of tech term isn't actually affordable for the people who are living there. So yeah, we do truly need to figure out a way to get around that, and hopefully, yeah, it needs to be pushed through, I suppose, through a government landscape than many others. But there is people out there who are doing good things to make sure that people can afford homes, and it needs our developers to be coming forward, as hopefully they are doing.
Well, Nathan, best of luck next week. I just going to give you the chance to say, if someone wants to go to UK Reef, can they, or are all the tickets gone? How do you go?
Yeah, the admin team will shout at me because the event's next week. But yes, there is tickets still available. ukreef.com is the easiest way to go.
Well, I'm going. I look forward to maybe bumping into you. Have a great conference. Iona, let's have a bestseller out of you. And Ben, keep flogging the flats. Take care. That's it for Business Unmuted. Catch me again next week.